Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Ian James joining us. Ian, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So you are a process consultant. What does that mean?
I help organizations with their business processes so that they run more smoothly, run more accurately, less errors, so that ultimately they're one of better, faster, cheaper. So it's really about efficiency by taking waste out of the activities we do in a business.
I was going to ask you, because I know that you started your career as a consultant with a company called GEC and later worked internally with GE. But when we spoke before hitting the record button, you mentioned that you had spent some time in the military in the UK. And I'm wondering, from that experience and also growing up kind of in a household or with a father in the military, what lessons did you learn from those years that you find to be very helpful now in business?
Well, I think the first one, as a child, moving around, I got very used to meeting new people and forming relationships very quickly. As a kid, you move school 2 or 3 times in, say, 4 years. You quickly learn how to make friends. And that has actually proved a very useful skill as a consultant, because you sort of parachute into a company and you have to build relationships with people very, very quickly. As an adult in the military, I think the leadership training that I got was invaluable. If anybody is out there listening who's been in the military, you have a jump start on a lot of people, because your ability to be able to apply the skills you learned in the military will really help you with clients, I think.
So the first part there that you mentioned, Ian, about moving around and kind of being taken to different places and having to really land on your feet quickly and meet new people and build relationships. What specifically, I mean, if you kind of boil that down to maybe the steps that you go through, and it might be just unconsciously these days, what is your approach? Because I think there's many consultants who recognize the importance of developing relationships, but maybe they consider themselves to be introverts, or they just don't think of themselves as being good at meeting people or good at interacting with people. That's a skill that you've now developed and used to your advantage. So what are some of the steps that you might suggest that people use, and what has worked best for you to be able to land in new, in this case, corporate environments, but it might also be when you were younger, that really allowed you to move and to develop those relationships quickly?
Well, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you have one key tool at the beginning, and that is to ask questions. People like to talk about themselves. They like to talk about their work. And it's really important to let them and to take a sort of nudge them along in the conversation, but by asking questions of people that you meet, depending on what kind of consulting you're doing. I know it sounds very basic, but you have to listen to these folks. They're actually, most of the time, they know what they're doing and they have a lot to say about what they do on a day-to-day basis. So it's really important that you let them and you listen and you reflect questions back to them. It's a huge, valuable skill to be able to begin a conversation with a simple question. And that's all it takes. Though you don't have to be very outgoing to say, so tell me about your role in this company, or tell me what it is that's really bothering you about this part of the process, which is the sort of questions I get to ask. I'm not sure what other people do, but developing an interest, a real interest in the people that you meet is critical.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. We just had Lou Jaffe, who's someone who's ran several businesses, created over $1 billion in shareholder value, exited a $500 million organization. And he came to one of our live events for some of our coaching clients. And one of the things that he shared was when he was in the CEO chair, hiring and working with consultants, what he really looked for was not just the ability for people to ask questions, but the ability to really ask good questions, really meaningful questions. Because if someone comes in and asks just a surface level question that demonstrates and shows that they haven't really done their homework, that's a quick sign this is probably not going to be a good fit. So I like what you really said there, Ian. Let's fast forward. So you then worked with another company called GEC. What did you learn? I mean, especially when it comes to GE, just because that's a brand that many people are familiar with. What did you learn from those early experiences that helped you to ultimately start your own consulting business?
Well, certainly GE and GEC had a big emphasis on process. And my field is process. I'd actually studied it as a graduate student. But what I really learned was on the technical side of my particular field, I saw when things were not going well, when they were going well, and the difference was mostly about getting the process right. So leadership's really important, but insofar as a leader can say, we have to do things differently, this is not going well, that ultimately ends up being about process. Don't get me started about process because I'll talk for hours about it. But I think successful organizations, and GE at the time was certainly a successful organization, have a firm grip of their processes, because that's where mistakes and that's where things take time. That's where costs get added. So organizations that can do that kind of stuff really well do well.
When you left GE and then later on started your own consulting business, how often did you mention or reference your experience at GE? Was that a really big point of leverage for you to get your business going in the early days?
Actually, no. I know it sounds weird, but it didn't actually occur to me to say, oh, yes, I've been a consultant. I worked in GE. And I mean, it has come up in conversation. Usually the client brings it up because they do their homework too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually more interested, if I'm doing my job right, especially when I'm making my pitch, as it were, I don't want anybody to take the time to ask about me because they want to be talking about their business and their problems. That's what I want them to focus on. It's not that I have anything to hide, but you've really to engage with a client and get them excited about the possibility that you can actually fix something is really where my focus is. So to be honest, I don't bring it up. I don't need to bring it up. And I may be atypical in that, but to be honest, it doesn't really occur to me. I'm really interested in the client.
Got it. Let's switch now to talk a little bit more about marketing and the experience that you've had marketing your business. When you emailed me, Ian, you said that you had to smile, as our website, the Consulting Success website, kind of described a lot of the problems with lead generation that you eventually cracked right over the years, but it would have saved you a ton of time and effort, not to mention money. What did you mean by that?
Well, I like to think of myself as a good consultant, but when you're a solo practitioner, which I am, that's only half of the job.
Mm-hmm.
And the marketing half is something I had to learn. It didn't come naturally to me. My client base is spread all over North America. I do work in the EU as well, but I actually had to learn how to build a sales process that was successful for me with very limited resources. And it was a painful, painful road. I made a lot of mistakes and lost a lot of money as an opportunity. I didn't earn what I could have earned once I got going and I realized how to do it. And things flowed much better.
And so what does that look like today? I mean, take us through your approach to lead generation that's just working best for you currently.
Okay, so if I set aside repeat business, which I think you have to for the moment, if I'm looking for new clients, what I have done is I've set my website up as a lead generation machine. That's it. I don't do anything else. I don't do calling. I don't do networking. I'm busy working and I want to spend my time working on client sites. So I need a lead generation machine. And eventually I learned how to do my marketing online to the point where people would pick up the phone. And for me, I can pick up the phone, and my sales process from that point onwards is about qualification and some negotiation. But you've got to start with lead generation.
So that's great from a high level. Now let's go deeper and kind of more specific. So what have you done or what are you currently doing with your website that's helping you to generate leads? If we just look at maybe some of the aspects, because I'm sure we can't cover them all, but what are maybe some of the biggest ones that really influence people contacting you through your website?
Well, my site has a lot of video. It started off as a brochure. I kind of put my website out there and I said, hey, I'm a good consultant. And absolutely nothing happened. And then I did some research and I realized that I needed to establish some kind of credibility. And I started to write articles. But it wasn't until I hit video. I do a lot of whiteboard animation.
Mm-hmm.
I make things simple for people to understand. And I get a lot of people coming to my site for basic process education. Among them are my potential clients.
And do they find you through Google searches? Do they find you through YouTube? Do they find you through some other path? What does the path look like for them to actually find you?
I experimented with AdWords, but it didn't work for me. So my clients come to me through Google searches.
Okay.
And they see pages coming up in the rankings because of the content. So it's a pure content marketing play. If I was a smarter marketeer, I would supplement that with lots of social media, and I am trying to build that up. But again, I'm on a journey. I wouldn't say I'm at the end of it at all. I'm still learning. So really, the key to my success has been to develop interesting enough content for people to come to the site and say, this guy has described my problem exactly. He's described it very succinctly. He's obviously solved it for other people. I think I would like to talk to this guy.
I think one of the biggest challenges that people have when it comes to content, Ian, is that beyond actually taking the time to create it and beyond consistency of doing it over the long term, is it can often take time for it to actually start working. So what has your experience been? When did you actually start? Like, when did your first video or content piece go up? How long has it been since you started that process until today where it's now working for you?
Believe it or not, it's 4 years. It does take time, but I would say that I really started to hit results about 6 to 8 months. I was actually on the point of saying, this video is expensive. I'm not sure if it's working. And then I started to get, I wouldn't say a stream, but the beginnings of some impact on my search rankings. And some things I got lucky with, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I chose a domain name so that if you type in process consultant, once you get past Wikipedia and all the not consultants who come up there, I'm pretty much number one on that as my domain name. But the content has really helped people call me and they constantly say, I really like your videos.
Yep. I think that's a great share there, lessons for people, because content, we've seen this, our business at Consulting Success, and I know with many of our clients that we work with, those over the long term, right, developing content and seeing the impact from it, it can be discouraging and it can certainly be time consuming to a degree, but it's long term, right? It's not going to necessarily create results for you in the short term, but over the long term, it's this asset that you have, this source of value that will continue to pay you dividends, bring you new opportunities. So what were you doing, Ian? You mentioned it took at least 6 to 8 months for kind of the first sign that this was going to work for you. And it's great that you stuck with it. But what were you doing to supplement, to generate business in that initial kind of 8 month or so period when the content marketing angle or content marketing kind of play wasn't yet working for you? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Well, as I say, I experimented with advertisements or AdWords, I should say. I also did a fair amount of networking. I know this will sound odd, but I am a bit of an introvert, and I really loathe facing a room full of people and having to force myself to be in their presence and talk to them. I forced myself to do it, and I got a couple of clients, one of whom was a long-term client, and that got me through the early and rather depressing stages. So to be honest, I think I could have done that better. There are different ways. I'm just kind of guy who would like to get a qualified lead, and I can take it from there. So I built a machine that gives me a qualified lead. And
you mean your website?
Yeah, that's the machine that spits out leads. I just got a call just before this conversation. I'll follow up with that and I'll qualify that potential buyer. I know by now I've worked out what I need to be sure of before taking it any further. That was another area where I made mistakes in the early days, not understanding how to qualify a potential client.
All right. So one more question on the topic of marketing, and before we kind of dig into a few other things that I think people will find a lot of value in. That is, so you mentioned that video is what's really driving your website, which is bringing leads to you. So are you putting together videos based on the questions that you feel your ideal clients most likely have, or kind of their main pain points? Or are you doing something else? Like, how are you actually approaching, or what are your thoughts or best practices around developing video content?
Well, I would say this. It's not a trivial undertaking. The key is having something interesting to say. There's an awful lot, and I see it wherever I go, of some pretty standard articles that look like they've been written by a contract writer who's read everything they can possibly read about whatever the subject is, and then they put together an article based on some sort of like soup of all the bits and pieces that they've taken from elsewhere. I've actually seen my own writing appear in my competitors' copy, the content, and I've called them up and they said, well, I didn't realize our guy who's writing this is actually plagiarizing, but that's what he was.
So back to your video, what are you doing with your content or your approach to creating the videos?
The process is I write a script, I record the script, I clean it up because there's a lot of ums and ers, and then I send it to my animator with some ideas about how it can be animated. And I outsource the animation part of it. He is very, very good. We've worked together now for a long time, and so we've developed an understanding about what I'm trying to do. He's got better and better at it.
Love it. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. So all your videos are animated videos. They're not you in front of the camera talking.
I've done a little bit of that. I don't like it because, again, I'm an introvert. And it's harder for me to express that sort of perkiness, and professionalism doesn't come naturally to me. So I prefer to use video. I prefer to use animation. I don't like to be in the picture too much.
Yeah. And I would imagine also that given your area of expertise, which is process, that actually lends itself well to animations or kind of whiteboard style videos, whereas a consultant in a different industry may actually do better by getting in front of the camera.
I admire the people who can do that. It is very effective if you can do it. And that's just down to practice,
right?
Or anything else.
So you help your clients with building and mapping out processes for their organizations. When do you think a consultant should really consider mapping out their own processes?
On day one. The first process, you need to understand your own sales process. You need to know what it is. How are you going to gather leads? How are you going to qualify those leads? How are you going to convert those leads? What point do you give a proposal? Do you do on-site assessment? Do you try and close the deal on the phone? Do you send a brochure? I mean, what is your sales process? What's going to work for you? And that will vary from person to person. But it is the process that you need to understand and have a way of measuring its success so that you can continuously improve it.
And is the key to write down the process? Because many people would say, yeah, no, I know what my process is. I know how I walk through or take a prospective buyer from initial contact to sale. What's the key? Is it just putting it down on paper? Is it having it mapped out in some sort of flow chart? What is the best practice?
Without doubt, if you write it down, and some people don't like diagrams, and I get that, but if you write it down, it forces you to think about it. You may think you understand your process because it's in your head, but as you have to try and express it on a piece of paper, either by diagram or in text, new thoughts will come to you simply as a result of writing it out. It's like learning a subject by teaching it. You have to really think about it and understand something before you can fully understand it.
And how often should people be reviewing or referencing that process that they've now written down?
I think the step in between the review and writing the process down is measurement. So you would be reviewing the measurement. How many leads did I get? How many did I convert? I don't close every deal. And I go back and I do a postmortem. Was I too expensive? Did I not listen properly? Did I try and sell too much consulting rather than trying to start with a pilot project to see how that goes? So the customer, the client, there's like a million things. But you need to measure your process, and then that will reveal where you need to tweak it.
Yeah, I think that's really good guidance there. One of the things that we've found to be very helpful for many of our coaching clients in our program is actually looking at their CRM pipeline, right? So visually, whether you're like your HubSpot or it doesn't matter, whatever platform you're using, you should be able to visually see how many leads you have, how many conversations, how many follow-ups, how many proposals sent, how many won, how many lost, how many you're nurturing, and so forth. And just being able to actually go in and jump into onto a screen share with a client and discuss the different elements. And you said kind of the measuring part is so important because in a quick glance, I can tell how healthy someone's pipeline is. and I can identify areas where there might be a lot of money being left on the table. So I think that's one type of process that people certainly should be looking at. And that point that you mentioned around measurement is so important, because if you're not measuring, if you're not consistently kind of analyzing or applying some critical thinking to your sales pipeline, you're most likely going to be missing a lot of opportunities and leaving a lot of money on the table.
Yes. What I've discovered from a consulting point of view is my pipeline isn't really a funnel. It's like a series of stages on an assembly line. And the point at which the client is slowest is where they're waiting for the right moment to start the project, the engagement, the consulting engagement. So I actually have a bit of a bulge in my pipe at that point in my pipeline, while a number of clients are sitting there trying to find a date to start a project. And that's, from my point of view, that's just peculiar to my industry, but I think other people might find the same thing.
Yeah, no, actually, Ian, I would say that most people find the same thing. If you're dealing with any kind of complex sale or a large engagement or a sizable engagement where there's high value and involves other people, that's very normal. And that's actually the exact reason why nurture and follow-up is so important, right? One of the biggest ways to increase sales is to ensure that you have a good follow-up process, a good nurture process in place, because just starting the conversation, having the conversation with prospective buyers, like that's critical. If you don't have that, there's no follow-up to be had. But once you've had initial conversation, if you're not consistently following up and staying on their radar, then they're going to end up forgetting about you. And when the time is right for them, you want to make sure that you're top of mind.
On the issue of follow-up, if I can say that one of the things I learned early on was speed of response to the inquiry. Because I'm working on a client side, I get an email. I don't have to respond to that email immediately. I can carry on working and then call the next day. What I learned was that if you get back to that person within 30 minutes, which is my target time, then you are far more likely you're about 60% more likely to close a deal. And the way I've achieved that is I set it up so that I get a text message every time somebody fills out my contact form. Appears on my phone, I excuse myself at the earliest opportunity, and I call that person back. And I've learned that really improves the likelihood of doing a deal. Strike
while the iron is hot.
Yeah, it doesn't really hang together. I don't understand why people do that, but if you get back to them right away, then you're far more likely to close.
Yeah. I mean, what I've observed is it's when someone is still thinking about that issue, right? They're still passionate about it. They're quote unquote still hot, right? They're not going to when they reach out, that's their hottest point, right? So that they're really excited about it. That's why they've taken action to reach out. Well, as time goes on, they get busy with other things and their temperature cools down. And so the longer that you wait, the cooler they become. And if someone else pops into their radar faster than you, then of course they're going to have the advantage. So what you're sharing, I think, is right on the mark. It's definitely true. I remember seeing studies in the insurance industry based on how quickly insurance agents respond to inbound inquiries and leads. And those that responded within the first few minutes had a significant advantage, and not even just advantage, were able to book significantly more business. So I think that's playing out for you as well. Ian, I want to thank you for coming on and just sharing part of your journey here and some of the best practices that you've accumulated over the years. I also want to ensure that people can learn more about your work, see some of your videos. Where's the best place for them to do that?
Well, my website, as we speak today, it's just a few days for major upgrade, but it's always going to be in the same place, theprocessconsultant.com. That's all one word, theprocessconsultant.com.
Wonderful. Ian, again, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have all that linked up in the show notes.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed talking to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.